Waffle Wipes washcloth is inspired by the delicious cinnamon sourdough waffles we sometimes make as a treat for breakfast. It has a raised edge created by a fun I-cord cast on, edging and cast off, and completed with a little extra tail of I-cord to make a hanging loop. It also has a dimpled centre which will pick up any messes you're using it to clean up, just like the dimples in an edible waffle hold the filling so nicely. And this is created by a very simple and relaxing stitch pattern that feels motivating to complete. Let's see how it's made. To make Waffle Wipes cloth, you're going to want around 35 metres or 40 yards of Aran or worsted cotton yarn. I'm using this Yarn Smith's Cotton Aran, which is a lovely soft cotton yarn with a great twist, so it's not too splitty. And you're also going to want some suitable sized needles. This one recommends a 5mm knitting needle or crochet hook, and I find I like a slightly smaller stitch for kitchen cloths, so I'm going to be using a 4.5mm, which is a US 7 needle to make this. I'm going to be using double pointed needles because I find that easiest for working the I-cord, and I don't find that the stitches slip off the end, but you absolutely could use a circular needle, and for the few rows that you'll be working I-cord on its own, you can simply slide these stitches to the end of the set of double pointed needles. You could also work this on straight needles, and in that case you would have to slip the stitches back onto your passive needle, the one that you're not knitting onto, when you are working the I-cord. I also find it really handy to have some locking stitch markers, the kinds that can be clipped onto a stitch and then removed from it, rather than the solid kind which are used for marking between stitches. Let's start by casting on 3 stitches to our working needle. I'm going to use a long tail continental cast on, but you can use any kind that you prefer. You do want to keep these stitches fairly loose. Next, slide the stitches to the other end of the needle ready to be knitted as I-cord. Draw the working yarn securely and tightly behind the stitches without pulling the stitches too tight. Remember, you want them quite loose at the start, as we'll be attaching other stitches to them later. Now knit the 3 stitches. 1, 2 and 3. Again, take care not to pull the stitches too tight. At this point, you can mark between the stitches that you have on the needle. So you can see there's a V there, and you actually want to mark between this V and the next one. Careful not to split the yarn. Now we want to mark between this stitch and the next one, again taking care not to split the yarn. And this is where we'll be picking up stitches later. Now slide the stitches to the other end of the needle again. Pull the working yarn tightly behind again so that you're making a firm I-cord. And now we're going to want to work a twisted or reverse yarn over, or you may even call this a yarn under. I think that's a great name for it, because normally in knitting, when we want to make a little loop, we do a yarn over our needle like this. But in this case, we're going to be drawing the yarn under the needle. This will make these stitches a little bit tighter at the end. Now you're going to knit those 3 stitches again, but make sure this yarn is really snugly pulled across, otherwise your I-cord will be saggy. 1, 2 and 3. And so that's our first row. We have got our 3 I-cord stitches, and we've now got a new stitch on the needle. This is going to be part of the cloth itself, the main body of the cloth. Next, we're going to slip the 3 I-cord stitches back onto our passive needle, the one that we'll be knitting from. And then we're going to want to do another twisted or reverse yarn over, or a yarn under, as I like to call it. knit your 3 I-cord stitches again. Now slide them back to the passive needle. Pull the yarn snugly behind and add your stitch. Knit your 3 I-cord stitches and slide the 3 I-cord stitches back onto the needle, and this is what you're going to do all the way until you have 35 stitches. So you can see we now have 3 cloth stitches, and we're going to want 32 cloth stitches and 3 I-cord stitches on our needle when we're ready to start the next section. So now we're ready to start the waffle stitch that's going to form the main pattern on the central square inside the border. We're going to turn our work to start work on the wrong side, and the wrong side is where the pattern of the waffle stitch is formed. The right side rows are really simple, they're just going to be knit straight across, but our first row is a wrong side row. To form the I-cord edging, what we're going to do is slip the first 3 stitches purlwise with the yarn in front. So we're just slipping those stitches to the working needle. So the pattern stitch is a 6-row repeat, and as I mentioned, the right sides are all knit straight across. The wrong sides, there will be 2 different rows to follow. One of them you'll follow twice and the other you'll follow once in each pattern repeat. So for row 1 of the pattern stitch, on the wrong side, we are going to work 2 purls, and then we'll start our repeat, which is to slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in front and purl 2. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in front and purl 1, 2. And we'll be doing that all the way to the end. And here we are on our final repeat of the pattern. We're going to slip 1, purl 1 and purl 2, and that takes us right to the end, as we haven't added the second side of our I-cord edging. We'll do that on the next side. So we're now on the right side of the work, and we're going to add our I-cord edging onto this end of the needle. You can see we're drawing our I-cord edging around on this side, and we want it to look the same on the other side as well. To do this, we'll have to pick up some stitches in the I-cord itself, and that's why we put those stitch markers in the first place. So use your needle to lift the stitches in the stitch markers onto the needle, taking care not to twist them. You can see we've got the V shapes of our stocking stitch in the I-cord here. So I'm going to slip the needle through there and put it back onto the passive needle. And then I'm simply going to knit the yarn through it. I'm going to now do the same with the second one. I'm going to make sure that the stitch isn't twisted. There we are. The yarn's slightly split, so I'll make sure that I don't split it with the needle. And now I'm going to knit through. And now my final one is going to be in this loop of yarn here, just below the first row we knitted. So I'm going to lift that onto the needle and knit the yarn through it. So you can see I've now got the 3 stitches I-cord on this needle. They're all knitted, and because row 2 is a right side row, I'm simply going to knit all the way to the end, including the I-cord stitches. And there, as we finish the last few stitches, We won't see much of the pattern yet, but what we will notice is that any looseness we found in our I-cord during the cast on has actually tightened up now, and the I-cord looks nice and firm with an even tension. So turn your work back to the wrong side, and remember that on every wrong side row we'll be starting by slipping the stitches of our I-cord. 1, 2, 3. We'll need to do that on both ends. I'll show you when we get to the end. And row 3 is going to be exactly the same as row 2. So we'll do 2 purl stitches before starting our repeat, and then we're going to slip a stitch and purl 2 until we get to those last 3 I-cord stitches. Slip 1, and we're doing that again purlwise with the yarn in front. Purl 1, purl 2, and we'll do that to the last 3 stitches, which will be our I-cord stitches. Slip 1, purl 1, purl 2, and then our final 3 stitches of the I-cord we're simply going to slip onto our working needle. And now we're happy with our I-cord stitches added to each end. I'm going to move the stitch markers to show where the I-cord stitches are. So I'll place one after the first 3 stitches, and I'll place one before the last 3 stitches, and that helps to stop me continuing the pattern repeat to the end and missing the I-cord stitches. So on to row 4, and as I mentioned, all of your right side rows are going to be knit straight across both the I-cord and the pattern stitch. So let's pull our yarn firmly across at the back and knit the first stitch. 1, 2, 3 I-cord stitches. We can slip our marker and then knit to the next marker. And here we are at our next marker, and we're going to just slip that marker and knit across. We don't really need the markers that much on the right side. Now I do find the last stitch here always looks a little bit loose. It does tighten up as you continue to work it, so don't worry too much, don't unpick certainly, but do work on keeping the ends pretty secure when you're turning the work and then drawing the yarn across. So we're on row 5 now, which is a wrong side row. We're going to bring the yarn around and we're going to slip these stitches and the stitch marker. 1, 2, 3 I-cord stitches slipped, the marker slipped, and then we're going to make sure we pull that yarn really nice and snug at this point. If we just leave it loose here, we'll get very loose stitches at the end. Now row 5 is our 3rd wrong side row, and this one will be a little bit different to the other 2. So with that yarn held nice and snug, we're going to knit 2 before we start the repeat. Then we'll slip the next stitch, and we're always going to slip this one purlwise with the yarn in front, and then flip the yarn back round to knit the next 2. And that's our repeat. We're going to slip one purlwise, knit 2, and we'll do that all the way across. Slip one purlwise, knit 2. So here we are on our last repeat. Slip one purlwise, knit 1, knit 2. We've reached the marker, so we're going to slip the marker and we're going to pull the yarn snugly as we slip those stitches and turn the work to start our next right side row. So row 6 is the last row of our repeat. It's a right side row, and that means we're simply just going to knit all the way across, remembering to hold that first stitch very snugly. Slip your marker and then knit also across all of your pattern stitches to the next marker. So here's our next marker, so we're just going to slip that and knit 3 I-cord stitches. With row 6 complete, we can see that our I-cord that we started at the bottom is now continuing up the sides of our cloth and we can see the waffle pattern starting to form. The slip stitches are forming the vertical ridges, and the garter stitch row in row 5 is forming the horizontal ridges, and in between them we have our stocking stitch forming the little dimples of the waffle. We need to repeat rows 1 to 6 until our cloth is square, and so that means we want to repeat it 8 more times and then repeat rows 1 to 4 once more, so that we can finish off with another I-cord edging along the top after a stocking stitch row, not after we've created this garter stitch ridge. So having left our cloth with one repeat of the stitch pattern on the needles, we've since worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more repeats of the same pattern and the first 4 rows again, and we're ready to start the next row on the right side, remembering that we've skipped these last 3 stitches in the I-cord. So we'll start working our I-cord stitches in the same way as usual. Knit the first one, knit the second one, but then the next stitch we're going to knit together with the first of our pattern stitches. So I'm going to need to lose that stitch marker, and then we'll knit 2 together. And this is how we're going to cast off. So let's now work the next row of I-cord, and this is what the repeat will be for the whole cast off. We'll slip the 3 I-cord stitches onto our passive needle, the needle that we're not knitting the stitches onto. Then we'll knit the first 2, and we will knit the third one together with the next of our pattern stitches. So there's our knit 2 together. And that's our repeat all the way across the cloth until we've only got 3 stitches, the I-cord this side and the 3 stitches on our working needle. As you go along, remember that when you're slipping the stitches onto your passive needle and getting ready to start your I-cord again, you need to make sure you pull this yarn quite tightly across, especially with the first stitch. You can tighten it up a little bit if you need to, like that. So let's work across. You can see how the I-cord is turning the corner here, and it's going to work itself all the way along the top of our pattern stitches, and when we get to the other end we'll take a look. So we're on our last one now. Knit 1, knit 2 and knit 2 together, and then we'll slip those back on the passive needle, and we can see now what we've got here is the 3 I-cord stitches that came up the left hand side and the 3 I-cord stitches that have run all along the cast off edge. And what we're going to do first of all is work a little bit more I-cord on this one if we want a hanging loop. And to make working the I-cord a little bit easier, I'm going to use this stitch marker to hold the 3 stitches that formed the side edge of I-cord, these 3 here. There we go. Now I can take them off the needle, and that's going to make the I-cord a little bit easier to work. If you're not using a double pointed needle or a circular needle, there's no need to do this because you'll need to slip the stitches back on each time anyway. But if you have a double-ended needle or a circular needle, you'll be able to slide the stitches to the other end of the needle to work the I-cord, which is a little bit quicker. So we're going to knit each of the 3 I-cord stitches, slide them along, and then remove the passive needle, which becomes your working needle. 1, 2, 3. Slide them along and switch over the needles. Remember to pull the yarn quite firmly behind so that your I-cord has a nice even tension. And you can work this until the length you want the loop to be. Remember, it will need 2 sides, so it needs to be twice as long as the finished loop. Let's see how that looks doubled over. Oh yes, that should be fine for hanging up the cloth. So all I need to do now is to loop this behind the cloth, and I want it to go over like this. You can just bring it round like this if you want, but I think if you give it a little bit of a twist, it actually looks a little bit better. So you can see that it's just twisted slightly. And then I need to graft these 3 stitches to these 3 stitches. To do that, I'm going to cut the yarn, leaving maybe 20 to 25 centimeters. And I'll also put these stitches back on the other needle. Makes it a little bit easier to work them together. And I'm going to start by coming up through the center here so that we can help this stitch to form a nice V shape. You can see that's exactly how the stitch will come out of this stitch here. And then I'm going to sew through these 2 here, because that's where that stitch will go to next. Can you see it's making a nice V in here? Then I'm going to slide that needle out, and now I'm going to go under this one and under this one. So that's the back loop of the same stitch we just came out of. You can see we've made another knit stitch here with the needle. So now I'm going to pull out the back loop of the next stitch and the front loop of this stitch, the final stitch. And there you can see I'm making another V shape here. And this one will go through the stitch it's just come out of and through the next stitch that's just come off the needle. And back through the back loop of the top stitch, and then finally through the last loop here, the one we've just taken it out of. So I can remove the needles now and just tighten that up a little bit so that it looks even with those 2. And I want mine to cross, that's why I put the little twist in there. So I'm just going to push the back behind. Now this does mean that if you don't like grafting, you could just sew those 2 ends together because they won't show from the front. I wanted to show it anyway because I think some people will want to graft that edge. And I'm going to weave in like this, just coming through to the front very slightly between 2 stitches there, and that will just hold that little loop in place, crossed over like that, and this will make a great hanging loop for your cloth and a neat corner for your waffle. Now I'm going to sew into the center of the I-cord edging, take the yarn over 1 strand of thread and bring it back to here, for a nice securely woven in edge. It's one of the nice things about projects that are finished with I-cord. It's really easy to weave in the edges. So let's have a look at the shape of our cloth. And so here's the finished cloth. I hope you'll enjoy making yours.